Ryan, tell us what's on your radar.
The Washington Post reported yesterday that the Biden administration is scrambling to figure out how to actually deliver the expanded Medicare benefits they plan to pass through the budget reconciliation process in the coming weeks. Central to that expansion is adding dental benefits to Medicare. But the CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, is warning that it could take 3 to 5 years to set up the new benefit. Now, they might be exaggerating how long it will take. But the fact that they even feel comfortable telling a president that it could take longer than his term in office to set up a dental benefit is a blaring warning that one of the biggest obstacles facing the entire progressive project is that 40-plus years of neoliberalism has cratered the ability of the government to actually do what lawmakers tell it to do. The government is now saying that it could take longer to add a dental benefit to Medicare than it took us to build all of the armaments needed to beat the Nazis. And doing that required restructuring and mobilizing the entire economy. All this requires doing is what dental insurance companies are already doing. Now, that's not to valorize private dental insurance. That product is built not to work. And people who have dental insurance barely get more coverage in general than those who have no insurance at all. And it's good that the White House is thinking about all of this now rather than after it passes, because there are options for getting those benefits out faster. But it speaks to a larger problem, and it was glaring during Obamacare when the government realized it didn't know how to build a website. The government under Obama didn't try to do much else after that, since Republicans controlled the House and nothing got passed. Trump tried to build a wall, and even that proved to be pretty difficult. It didn't help that Congress hadn't actually authorized it. Trump, along with congressional Democrats, also created the PPP program, which temporarily backfilled some business payrolls. And there were some hiccups, but that money actually did get out the door. One reason it worked was that the money was sent out first, and then questions were asked later. If the business owner was found to be lying, they'd get in trouble. Normally, programs work the other way around, where the person has to prove their need first, and then they get their money. That creates endless bottlenecks, and that's what's happening with the broken rent relief program, with some $40 billion still unspent, even as renters owe tens of billions in back rent. The dental benefit is just one program that the government will struggle to make operational in the best case scenario where Democrats actually do pass the $3.5 trillion package. The bill envisions creating a climate conservation corps, tens of thousands of mostly young people doing climate mitigation work all across the country. That'll be no easy program to set up. The child tax credit, which sends $250 to $300 per month per child to families, is up and running, but many are still left out. Funding daycares without getting ripped off by private equity firms will be another challenge, and so will implementing universal pre-K and pre-K3 and pre-K4. And making sure the climate investments actually get invested in areas that do something about climate change will be the most important challenge of all. One of the most effective agencies in government today is one they could learn from, and it's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It has 3 qualities that help it stand out. It has a single director rather than a commission, so its leadership can actually make decisions. It's fairly new, so its computer systems aren't all from the 80s or 90s. And it pays salaries that are competitive with the private sector, meaning you can attract mid-career or senior talent and you can keep those people there rather than having them sell out to K Street. By underpaying our government workers, by giving them crappy equipment and rules upon rules upon rules, we incentivize many of the best and most ambitious workers to leave and get better paying jobs in the private sector. And that trend just exploded during the Trump years, as many government workers decided they couldn't, in good conscience, work in a government run by Trump. Making government work again will take more than just a task force. It's going to take reform that makes it easier to hire new workers, easier to reward ones who are doing good work, and yes, easier to dole out professional consequences to ones who aren't. The federal government isn't a social work project. It's not a jobs program for the Maryland suburbs. Its function is to carry out the laws and build the programs that Congress creates. There's actually a word for that, and it's called governing. Democrats are going to have to relearn how to do it. Kim, do you think it's possible?
Well, your radar is so interesting today because I feel like it almost makes the case for people. I'm sure Alyssa's going to jump in and say, see, this is why we need to have the private sector jump in and take over these things because government fails. I'm curious, actually, from you, Ryan, what you think can be done in order to fix these things. If it's not moving it to the private sector, how do you envision fixing this?
Well, I think they would need to blow up the filibuster and take it seriously legislatively to sit down and say, okay, what are the bottlenecks here? And how can we get hiring moving forward? And how can we get all of these government computers off of Windows 97? Or and actually talk to the leadership in these agencies and ask them, what is it that's holding you back? And we know what some of it is, and significantly, it's a government mindset that just tries to prevent people from getting in trouble, rather than actually achieving goals. So that's why the CMS will say this could take 3 to 5 years, because then if they deliver it in a year, which a lot of people think is quite possible, everybody gets credit for that. But if it takes them 5 years, they say, well, look, we told you in a worst case scenario it could take 5 years. So what is going on there? Like what is setting up those incentives, and how do you disrupt those incentives? But first of all, you really have to upgrade the technology. Like the systems are broken that people are working on, and no government and no Congress has wanted to do that because they don't want a story in the New York Times saying that the government is spending X billions of dollars on Windows or on Apple computers. And so instead, they're like, well, to avoid that headline, let's just have everybody's laptop breaking down constantly, if they even have laptops.
No, I mean, Ryan, this is one where we don't disagree at all. To Kim's point, I do think it makes the case for why government often isn't the best, institution to carry out crucial benefits that people need. But I will say this, there is nothing more uninspiring that I've dealt with in my life than the bureaucracy of the federal government. And you're talking about tens of thousands of people. You're talking about decades of failure in hiring and promotion structures, and honestly allowing many people, mid-level people to coast. One of the proposals I'd suggest, I appreciated that you alluded to making firing easier for people if there's bad behavior or a lack of performance, but it's virtually impossible to fire career government officials, even if they're doing virtually nothing. That was something that we looked at one point in the Trump administration and didn't move forward. Now, if you're a political appointee, which I always was, you could be fired at will at any time, and that's what you're signing up for. But you have people who have spent decades in institutions, at times doing virtually nothing or poor performance, and it's impossible to fire them. I mean, I have countless stories about it taking 3 to 4 weeks to do a basic thing like get a government badge so I could walk on the Pentagon campus. I literally I was a senior staffer and had to be escorted around by an assistant. Things that you can do at a private company, you would just be gone. If you just can't get it done, then you're just gone. I do think the PPP program is a good example. There were hiccups, but of an effective program that was stood up quickly during a crisis and actually largely did what it was supposed to. I give a ton of credit to Steve Mnuchin, but again, that was somebody who brought a total private sector mindset to how they were going to execute it. That's what I think is needed. One more thing I would just note is, so NIH, for example, they have, because they need to recruit subject matter experts and people who could, be at the biggest pharmaceutical company making millions of dollars a year, they do pay more. Like Dr. Fauci makes more than, most capped government salaries because he's a subject matter expert. So you've got to have competitive benefits for people with expertise, and you've got to allow firing, or this is just never going to work.
And you have to be able to push through this mindset that says that we have to just avoid bad headlines. And the PPP program got tons of bad headlines because the way that this country's culture works is that we're always on the lookout for somebody who's getting something that they don't deserve. Like that is what that's what all of us want in our social circles. That's what the media wants. Everybody is just looking for somebody who's trying to get one over on somebody. So if you remember, all of the articles that came out in the first several weeks of the PPP program were like, this bad person is getting this money. This bad person is getting this money. This bad person is getting this money. In the background, tens of millions of people who needed it got the money, and so and it was fine. So the politicians can look at them and be like, you know what, we can actually weather a couple of these stories. So what if a landlord and a tenant get together and commit some fraud and get some money, and then you have to catch them on the back end? So what? That's better than there being $40 billion in unspent money while tens of thousands of people are getting evicted. Do the governing first and then come back in the end and catch the fraud is the argument that I would make. But Kim, we gotta leave it there. But I am looking forward to what's on your radar next.